NFU President Meurig Raymond.
Good morning, fellow delegates, Secretary of State, Commissioner Hogan, distinguished guests. Welcome to the NFU's Conference 2015. As usual, we have a fantastic lineup of speakers and a record audience. I am really looking forward to this conference, and I hope you will all find it useful, stimulating, and enjoyable. We stand here today in the shadow of a coming general election, now only 72 days away. I do not exaggerate when I say that for farming, this is shaping up to be one of the most important elections we have ever faced. If the opinion polls are to be believed, the chances of any single party having an outright majority are small. A coalition seems inevitable, which means that farming and rural policies of all the parties, big and small, may be crucial. The theme of this conference is backing British farming in a volatile world. And I hope you will have all seen the NFU's campaign in all the papers. Great British food gets my vote. I want to link these two key messages together because there is no doubt that British food and farming does get the vote of the British consumer. We, the NFU, have commissioned the independent organisation YouGov to carry out a survey which shows that 85% of British people want to see supermarkets sell more British food. The same survey shows that nearly 8 out of 10 people believe the government should do more to ensure a secure and affordable supply of British food. This is not just us saying that, this is the general public. That clear message from British people must be taken on board by the next government. The answer to the question, who cares about British food, is overwhelmingly the British public cares about British food. So my question today is, how can a future government back British farmers? I'm not asking what farming wants. I'm asking what the country needs. In fact, I'm saying what the public expects. Simply, voters expect a British government to back its own farmers and food producers. The challenge has never been more pressing. In 1984, we produced more than 80% of what we consumed in this country. If you like to look at it this way, our national cupboard lasted us well into the autumn. By 2013, the cupboard was bare by August the 7th. If we go on like this, by 2045, we will run out by mid-summer. Who would want to lead the country down a path where we produce less than half the food we eat? This will be totally unacceptable to the British public and in no way in the national interest. I have sometimes been accused of urging farmers to blindly produce more. This is not true. I would never tell any farmer how to run their business, much less to expand their production without a sound business case. But my point is this: the British population is growing faster than any other large European country. We will be 70 million people in 20 years' time. At the same time, our self-sufficiency is falling. The British consumer wants, indeed expects, to be able to source British food. Yet, if nothing is done, it will be far more difficult to achieve. We will become ever more reliant on the rest of the world to produce our food. And when you look at global volatility at the moment, you have to ask, is that what we want? Is that what is best for Britain? The answer is clearly no. I believe we, governments, farmers, the food chain, have a duty to address that problem. In other words, this is about backing British farming in a volatile world. In the last 10 years, British farmers have become much more exposed to world markets. This is a consequence of decisions taken at international, European, and national level. In the world, two huge blocks of production and consumption are roughly in balance. But any small change, one way or the other, has big consequences. The price spikes that we saw in 2007 and 2011. The low prices we're now seeing in some sectors, particularly milk. In a word, volatility. The mechanisms we used to see to ensure stability have been dismantled. Quotas for milk end this year, and for sugar in 2017. Tariffs have come down, and there are an unprecedented number of trade deals on the table that will expose European producers to further competition. Export refunds are no longer used. Intervention, where it exists, is at a minimum level. So we need to find other ways to manage price volatility. Everyone knows that a boom and bust roller coaster ride is the worst environment for the long-term planning and investment that will be essential if we are to grow our sector and meet our customer expectations. So what can politicians do to help? Firstly, make sure the food chain works fairly. We applaud the fact that the Grocery Court Adjudicator has now been given the power to impose fines. We want the next government to extend the remit further down the chain. Commissioner Hogan, I welcome the fact that you are willing to take further action at a European level. And we need it. Our experience in this country is that voluntary measures in the food chain do not necessarily work. And in those cases, you must be courageous enough to impose compulsory measures. We need unhindered access to futures markets. They are an essential part of risk management. Commissioner, there's a view in parts of Europe that futures markets are just for speculators and should be curbed. Your colleague, Lord Hill, is in charge of this area. But I hope you'll give him a clear view of their importance to our sector. We want to extend futures markets into new areas like milk products and fertilizers, not strangle them with misguided regulation. We need longer periods for tax averaging. Dairy farmers had a reasonable year last year. Things are bad at present. But farmers are now faced with big tax bills. Our direct competitors, the Irish farmers, can average their tax over 5 years. And I ask you, why cannot we have the same? We need better labelling regulation. It is entirely unacceptable that country of origin labelling is not extended to cover milk products. We need to remove the barriers to diversification in both production and marketing. We must not allow NIMBYs to capture the planning system to stop poultry sheds being built or stop appropriate alternative energy projects. And yes, we need to export more. I very much welcome the Secretary of State's commitment here, but don't let's pretend exporting will be a panacea. There are also things the supply chain must do to make our production base more resilient, which surely must be in the interest of everyone, primary producers, manufacturers, and retailers. It is time that retailers deliver on their social responsibility plans and put aside the bad practices of the past. Retailers must commit to longer-term contracts and longer-term relationships. And we all need to better promote the values of British farming and British food. The public and consumers have been brilliant in the current dairy crisis. We must all work to retain their support and trust and give them reason to choose British products. But it's more than that. We need more investment in processing, and we need to be more resilient. We're often told that if we want our businesses to be more resilient, we need to make sure we're as efficient as we can be. And that is a fair point. But I say to policymakers, how can we be efficient and competitive when we are hampered by disastrously poor regulation? Poor regulation that, to take one example, threatens to ban hundreds of crop protection products through a misguided use of precautionary principles. Most of all, we need future governments to back British farming across the board. Food and farming is massively important to Britain and to British people. And for every dairy farm, at least 5 other businesses are dependent. Future governments need to recognise that and commit to championing and backing great British food. Why? Well, price volatility is not going to go away. But if we could get government and the supply chain working together, I am convinced we will be much better placed to ride out future storms and take advantage of better times when they come along. I cannot leave the subject of volatility without saying something about the Common Agricultural Policy. The NFU's position that we don't want to be dependent on direct payments. We'd rather receive our income from the marketplace. If we can get a fairer supply chain, we'd accept direct payments being reduced, provided, of course, this is done evenly across Europe and the rest of the world. But at the moment, the market is not working. As we stand today, direct payments are vital to many farmers. Direct payments are a crucial lifeline against volatility. In 2013, more than half of the average farm's net income was received via the single farm payment. Two things flow from that. First, turning to you, Secretary of State, we have a new payment system this year. We all have to apply by May the 15th, just 8 days after the general election, or we risk penalties, or in the worst case scenario, no payment at all. There have already been teething problems with the new system. It's not your fault, Secretary of State, but many here are haunted by the disaster of 2005. There were huge delays, muddles that took years to unravel, if they ever were, and £600 million worth of fines. So we are relying on you, the Rural Payments Agency, to guarantee we have no repeat of that. Now turning to you, Commissioner Hogan, we said from the start that the last CAP reform was a dog's breakfast. And it gives me no pleasure whatsoever to say we were right. Instead of a reform which would have helped European farmers become more globally competitive, we've got a short-sighted attempt to defend a budget which has heaped costs and conditions on farmers with little or no obvious benefit to anyone. Again, Commissioner, none of this is your fault. But we are looking to you to sort out the mess. We urge you to simplify the policy wherever you can. Make sure farmers are not penalized for not following rules that no one has yet explained to them. Above all, make a start as soon as you can in putting the CAP back onto a proper course. End the nonsense that has come with greening, like the so-called three-crop rule. I know from the time I have spent in Brussels and Strasbourg, this will not be easy. But we are counting on you, Commissioner, and in return, you will have our full support. So coming back to the general election, tomorrow you will have an excellent opportunity to quiz the political parties on their plans for agriculture. It'll be your session, but let me briefly mention two issues that are bound to come up. Firstly, bovine TB. We've been calling for a policy to eradicate this disease at this conference for years. Latest figures in England show that at least things have not been getting worse recently. But let's be clear. That still means we are killing 28,000 cattle in England last year. So not getting worse is not good enough for those many farmers suffering the consequences of the disease. It's not good enough for those in the areas where the disease is still spreading. And it's nowhere near good enough if we are going to beat this disease. I know at first hand, as many of you here do, the human misery as well as the financial consequences when a farm is under TB restriction. What's new this year is that we now have a comprehensive strategy in England to eradicate bovine TB. It's based on keeping TB out of the low-risk area, beating it in the high-risk area, and stopping its spread in the edge area in between. And this policy has got the approval of the European Commission, and the European Union is contributing significantly to its cost. Eradicating bovine TB will not be easy, not for government and not for farmers. But this strategy does have the support of farmers, precisely because it is comprehensive. It addresses all aspects. Sadly, there are not easy solutions. But I want to stress that in the two pilot areas, in Somerset and Gloucestershire, we are already seeing that TB incidence on farms has declined. And not just by a small amount either. In the Somerset pilot area, TB incidence on farm has decreased from 34% to 11% compared to 2 years ago. In Gloucestershire, vets are also reporting a reduction in TB in cattle. And just 2 days ago, one of our Gloucestershire members was given the fantastic news that his farm is now clear of TB for the first time in 11 years. He is very clear that the only thing that's changed on his farm is that we are now doing something to control the disease in the wildlife. Let me make a heartfelt plea to all political parties. Do not make this a party political issue. Do not be tempted to tear up this strategy. Do not be tempted to commit only to the politically easy bits. And don't give up on eradication. I was bitterly disappointed when the main opposition party seemed to have committed to doing just that, and flying directly in the face of official veterinary advice. And I urge that party to think again, because whichever government is in power, it will need a strategy. And that strategy will need European approval. And most importantly, it will need farmer support. Trying to tackle this disease without farmer support will make a difficult job impossible. The other burning issue is our membership of the European Union, in or out. The European Union is important to us as farmers. It gives us access to the single European market, where 3/4 of our exports go. It gives us access to labour, particularly from the new member states. And it gives us the CAP. And yes, there are pros and cons to all of these. But what we don't know is what life would be like outside the European Union, because none of the main political parties have given us any hint of what kind of agricultural policy they would pursue. If there's going to be a referendum, there's going to be the prospect that we leave the European Union, whether the government of the day wants that or not. It's not a hypothetical question. That is why we need more clarity for everyone, so that they can make up their minds on this one in full knowledge of the facts. And finally, as I said at the beginning, this election is critical. In the National Farmers Union, we have a clear vision of where we want to go. A vibrant, productive, profitable and competitive industry supplying the lion's share of the food that our consumers expect and demand. And I am sure politicians would love to receive the approval rating British farming receives. And we must all get out and ensure British food does get our vote. We look forward to all political parties to join us in backing British farming. Thank you.